So, my name is Jay Kidd. I am the founder and creative director for Wraith Games. Wraith Games is a studio. We've been operating since 2005. We're just outside of Cincinnati, Ohio. There are 12 of us and 2 interns. And in this talk, we are actually going to be talking all about raising your studio from absolutely nothing, gaining funding to sort of gain operation for that studio, and then actually releasing a product into the wild. Now, I've given this talk at a whole bunch of different events, and the last time I gave this talk here, I was actually a giant head on a projector screen because I had missed my transportation here and I had to Skype in. Thankfully for me, the panel ended up lasting 3 hours then. Now, what I ended up doing for this weekend was I actually broke that panel up into 3 separate panels. But this is by far the most popular sort of part of that panel. Because I'm going to tell you right now, everyone wants money, and everyone wants to know how to get money. Very important. So, that's why it's Gamedev FUNDamentals. Now, here's the thing. Over the course of this, I'm going to talk about structuring a business plan, bringing on some of your employees, choosing a type of business to be, taking your business plan and showing it to investors, whether that be banks, angel investors, things like that. I'm going to briefly touch on crowdfunding a little bit. Then I'm going to talk about the idea of small business development centers and what they can do for you. Because almost all indie game studios are small businesses. But here's the thing. None of you actually, well, I'm not saying none of you, but I'm saying indies seem to not like talking about small business development. Isn't that kind of weird? So many small studios don't think of themselves as legitimate small businesses. They don't think that they're able to actually get the kind of resources that most small businesses do. I mean, if you were to open up a food truck, all you'd have to do is go down to the city and be like, please give me money. Please give me permits. I want to do food trucks. Tacos, they're amazing, But here's the thing. You can do that as independent developers. Just because video games are big and scary things that typical investors aren't really huge fans of, doesn't mean you can't use these same resources. So, let's start with my favorite part, the business plan. And I know you guys already are probably thinking, business plans. Especially if you guys have already had a business major or a business minor or anything. You're like, I've had to do business plans for all these imaginary brands already. No, business plans are terrible. Business plans for video games are vital. Because I'm going to tell you, if you're going to seek some sort of traditional funding, like from a bank or from an angel investor, or even some sort of grant, and yes, and I will be discussing that, some of you will be eligible for actual grants, which is really cool. The thing is that you need to explain what a video game is and why that's a business. I remember this very, very distinctly. I was 9 years old talking to my mom, and I had said, okay, yeah, I want to make video games. And she's like, video games? I don't understand. I'm like, yeah, when I grow up, I want to make video games. And she's like, that's not a business. That's not a thing you can do. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, no, you can't make money making video games. Someone's got to be getting paid somehow, right? Like there's money, exchange of goods and services. Like even at 9, I knew that her line was a bit of bull. She had no clue that video games could make money. I actually, that same mom, I have 2 moms. If any of you have a problem with that, the door's right there. So the thing is that I had coffee with her last year. We were at a lovely little coffee shop right across from the studio, and she apologized to me. She's like, I didn't know. But that's the thing. So many people out there, so many bankers, they're just like your moms. They're just like your dads. You know what I mean? They don't think of video games as a business. They don't think of video games as a product that can be made. And they certainly don't think of video games as something that can be made by 1, 2, 5 people. They don't think of video games as a part-time venture either. I do video games full-time. But I can guarantee you, a lot of you starting your first studios, A lot of you starting as independent developers, a lot of you starting as solo developers will not be doing this full time. Now, I will say though, we will be tackling today the idea of how you can sort of get by doing it full time even when you're just starting out. But that business plan. So the first thing you need to do is you need to show in your business plan that you have experience. Probably thinking, yeah, no, duh. But what kind of experience is going to be relevant to a banker? You know what I mean? Like, is a banker going to know what a game jam is? Are you going to have to explain what a game jam is? Well, there's your first mistake. You want to be able to give the broad strokes of the entire industry and the broad strokes of what you're going to be doing in that industry without actually being like, oh, here's the nitty-gritty. Because if you start describing the nitty-gritty of the industry, their eyes are going to roll to the back of their heads and they're going to close your business plan and it's going to be it. Oh, and when I say close your business plan, if you are not going to your local printing shop and getting a high-quality, premium-bound hardcover business plan, well, you're doing yourself a disservice. It's like $20. Like, a little bit of class and a little bit of presentation goes a long way. The prettier you can make your business plan, the better. But that's for a little bit later. So the thing is, you have to be like, oh yeah, no, I've done these games. Now, say you've made a few Game Jam games. Show some screenshots in your business plan. Describe briefly what the game is. They're not going to know the scope of this project. Maybe describe how long it took. If the game has made money, if it's been significant, which it probably hasn't, to be fair, describe that. If it's not, no need. Just show that you are competent. Now, say you have a small team of developers. Say it's you and a friend who's an artist, and a friend who's a programmer, and a friend who's a designer. The four of you decide to sit down and make these games together. Well, show that as your board. Show that as your team. Give little team bios. Talk about your experience. If you have any sort of awards or accolades, even if it's just like, I won a high school art show and I am the artist, put that in your business plan. If you have worked on computer software, if you're part of a software club in college, if you did anything related to the industry, fluff it up. Use some enhancers. Use some synonyms. I remember once when I was in high school, I was applying to a new job at a fast food restaurant, and I'd worked at a previous fast food restaurant. I used drive-through technician as the title for my previous job. The manager loved that. I got the job. So, you know, sometimes you can be a drive-through technician. Sometimes you can be a computer software engineer. Maybe you've only spent, I don't know, 2 semesters in a coding class. Maybe your title on that business plan is computer software engineer. It's not like it's your LinkedIn. It's not like you're looking for a job. You are saying this is your role within the team, and there's nothing wrong with that. However, you do have to have an understanding of your skills and an understanding of your business, because if you're getting a loan and you can't repay that loan, that is a bad thing. Now, so you've described your team. You've described your previous works. You've described all of those things. Now you have to do what is called a SWOT analysis. You have to identify your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. Ugh, wonderful. Now you're probably thinking, strengths and opportunities, threats and weaknesses, those sound like each one of those is kind of paired. Well, think of it this way. Your strengths are internal. Your weaknesses are internal. Your opportunities are external. Your threats are external. What is your team, or you as an individual, what are you good at? Do you have accolades? Do you have previously released things? You can be a little redundant. If you mention that in your bio section, bring it back up. If it's important to mention once, it might be important enough to mention 3 or 4 times, especially because I tell you right now, no banker is reading all of your business plan. Big thing, by the way. Do not write at a high school level. And you're probably thinking, well, of course not. I'm going to write at a post-college level. Duh. Right at a middle school level, please. Polysyllabic words, as few as humanly possible. Because they're skimming these things. They don't actually care about the nitty-gritty. They want you to be short, quick, and succinct. Don't use succinct. So, the thing is that what you're going to want to do is say, like, oh, no, we did this game jam in 48 hours, and we were able to do team management. That's a strength. You're very, very quick. You're very, very focused. Maybe your team has a wide breadth of experiences. Strengths. Weaknesses. We don't have a musician on the team. We don't have a sound engineer. Okay, cool. Now you have to explain for every weakness and every threat how you're going to counteract those. And for every strength and every opportunity, you're going to have to explain why those even matter. Because again, bankers, they know nothing about this industry. They do know it's scary, though. They think software is high risk, and they think software, especially games, is something that only big studios can do. So, weaknesses. Be honest. Don't be brutally honest, but be honest. Be like, oh, weaknesses. Well, we don't have a lot of funding. Oh, gee. Okay, that's fine. That's amazing. Cool. Weaknesses. Well, yeah, we have an artist, but he's kind of the weak link, you know. Only has 2 years of experience, while the rest of us have 4. Okay, that's fine. Okay. Opportunities. Are you in West Virginia and have an absolutely wonderful West Virginia Game Developers Expo right down the street? That is an opportunity. Do you happen to have the contact information for a Sony representative that you picked up at such an event? Do you happen to have a local small business development center that you happen to have the contact information of? Opportunities. Do you happen to have a unique product that has never been seen before on the marketplace? Do you happen to have access to development kits that your competition may not have? Well, competition may not have is a little loose, but I mean, you can mess with it. What are the things that are external, things that are not actually part of the heart and soul of your team that are going to be aiding you along the way? Opportunities. Threats. Now, most people think of threats and they're like, oh, like competition? Oh, no, that's the next section. For threats, it's more things like maybe you're a mobile developer primarily, and you know that the mobile market isn't exactly the most stable right now, you know, because there's so many games out there. Well, okay, that's a threat. Now what are you going to do to counteract it? Well, we happen to have the contact information of some very, very good app reviewers. You know, that'll be able to bump us up to the front page. Okay, cool. Threats. What if you, not naming any individual studios, because again, that goes directly in your competition, what if you know that there are a few studios that are doing products that are similar to yours? Okay, cool. What separates your product? What separates your game? Threats. Like, threats can be kind of nebulous. You get to be creative on this one. Because you need to be able to show that you understand the problems in your industry. The SWOT analysis is all about showing that you know what you're getting yourself into. It's about having a plan. Now, you don't write 80 billion paragraphs. You're going to want like 2 paragraphs for each part of the SWOT analysis. Basically a list and then a counter. A list and a counter. Fine. Competition. Mojang is not your competition. Blizzard is not your competition. Nintendo's not your competition. Bethesda's not your competition. And also, weirdly enough, the kid down the street who makes iPhone games and releases them for free online is not your competition. Classically, you'd be thinking, oh, absolutely they're competition. Every person who's making video games today is my competition. Nope. You're appealing to entirely different markets. What you're going to want to look for is studios who are not... They're not studios that are like so big that they're ubiquitous. You want studios that you can become. What about Yacht Club Games? Who here, by show of hands, knows who Yacht Club Games is? Shovel Knight, anyone? Ah, there we go. Okay, fine. What about Double Fine. Psychonauts? One more, okay. These are studios that have not a whole bunch of employees, but have been doing really, really well. Way Forward. Shantae, Mighty Switch Force. Okay, so these are your triple I studios. Heck, on our SWOT analysis, we actually chose some of our not SWOT analysis, for our competition section, we actually chose some of our very close friends up north of where we are, Multivarious Studios. They're actually Ohio's largest game studio. They actually asked us to move in to the same building as them so we could like share resources and stuff, but none of us wanted to move to Columbus because it's Columbus. The thing is that they are 12-member team. They've been doing games for not quite as long as us, but they're way more successful. They actually run the Midwest's largest gaming expo, GDEX. A shameless plug, I know, but they were actually people we used as competition. We also used Double Fine. We also used Yacht Club Games. We also used Way Forward, because those are really good examples of pretty strong indies. Triple I, if you were. Use them. And explain how many team members they have. Explain how long they've been in the field. Explain why they are special. And explain why you're kind of scared of them. But in a way where it sounds like you understand that you want to be them. Even if your goal is for AAA, eventually, and I'm going to tell you, indie's better than AAA. The thing is that you're going to want to basically be like, hey, yeah, no, like, These are the big dogs in the indie teams, you know. But I'm not talking again like Rovio and Mojang and stuff, because they're so huge that they're not even like, you put that on a piece of paper and like, hey, the guys who made Minecraft. People are gonna be like, oh yeah, that multi-billion-dollar company that was later bought by Microsoft. You will never be them, but you can definitely be Yacht Club Games. That is not difficult. Well, I mean, obviously it's difficult, but I mean, as far as like business size and scope is concerned, that is something that a bank sees as realistic. So you have to put just a right twist of fear and just a right twist of reverence. Understand that competition, and then this is something that we did, which is absolutely wonderful. Is you have to also make a little section explaining why competition in the indie game scene is a dumb question to bring up. Because every business plan has to have it. But you need to explain that there are literally millions of game developers, and the fact that as a community you're less competing with each other and more competing with like just the platform itself. Really? Like, your biggest competition isn't another indie developer. Your biggest competition is actually Steam, is actually the App Store itself. It is a weird industry we live in. I see some questions for that, because I will be doing a Q&A at the end of that there. So it basically has to do with positioning, but again, Q&A. So the thing is that you explain, okay, bigger indie studios, I want to be this, cool. You have to then explain strategic resources. Strategic resources are wonderful things. My big suggestion as far as strategic resources go, contact your local small business development center. Your state will be funding small business development centers. If you're lucky, your county and your city will be as well. They will offer you free business advice. They will offer you free business classes. They might even offer you incubator space, where you're only paying at cost. You want like 800 square foot of studio space for you to run your team with free internet and free utilities for $400 a month? They're who you'll call. They're literally run by the government. They have to help small businesses because they want to see you grow. They'll often have resources for you as well monetarily, and will often have mentorship. Heck, ours hooked us up with our accountant and our lawyer. And if you have an accountant, a lawyer, a small business advisor, and a studio space when you're just starting out, oh man. Now, the thing is that in addition to that sort of thing, you have to, put names and contact information and everything of this strategic team. Well, here's the thing too. If you don't have the money for a studio space right now, and you don't have the money for equipment, that's where the next section comes in. That next section is a cost analysis breakdown. You have to say, we have spent this much money, and by the way, they're going to really want you to have spent money, even if that stuff is sort of in kind. What in kind basically means is, I got donated a computer that is worth $700 by a supportive people. Yeah, fine. You know what I mean? That's in kind. They want to know the general value of that thing. They don't care if you got it for free. They just care about the value. So in kind is absolutely wonderful. You can mark if it's in kind or not, because sometimes, depending on the bank, if you mark if something's in kind, that shows that there are people who really support you. Sometimes people are like, oh, no, you just got it for free. You didn't even work for that. It really depends on the banker. Know your bank. You're going to be submitting to several banks anyway. You never just submit to one bank. If you have a really good business plan. Oops.
Like in-kind?
In kind. I-N space K-I-N-D. So I guess you could put a hyphen in there, but I've never seen it hyphenated. Yeah. So the thing is that you're going to want to submit to several banks. If you have a good enough business plan, they will actually fight over you, and that is the best part. So the thing is that you want to be able to say, I've spent this much money, I have this much equipment, I've spent this much money on paying my employees so far, and then you have to say, this is what I want to buy. All the events you want to go to, how much is it going to cost to go to PAX, how much is it going to cost to go to E3, how much is it going to cost to open that studio, how much is it going to cost for small business insurance, how much is it going to cost for travel time to different places, how much is it going to cost for new computers, software licenses, all that jazz. You're going to want to put that all down. You're going to want to say every marker that you intend to buy, every bit of printer paper you intend to buy, all that jazz. And then from that pool of money, you need to show that breakdown, explain briefly why it's important, 1 or 2 sentences please, and usually do that in chunks. Be like office supplies, and then 1 or 2 sentences as to why office supplies are important as if they don't already know. So the thing from that point is that is then the amount you ask for. Sometimes it's even cool to ask for a little more than that. That's sort of floating cash. Sometimes you need to ask for a little less than that, and that's fine too. My general thing is $75,000, probably good asking amount. Try not to go over $350,000 because you're a first-time business. It's a lot of money. They would probably say no. But anything below $75,000, and it's like, why are you even giving you money? And you, like a lot of you probably think $75,000, that's a lot of money. Yes, it is, but it does not go far. Like, we blow through way more than that at the studio, and we are super small and super broke. So the thing is that you need to basically say, I know what it costs to run this. I know exactly why I'm asking for this money. I didn't just see that was the maximum amount that you'll let us borrow. There's reasons. There's absolutely reasons. Cool. Projected timeline. You have to explain what your team is going to be working on over the course of 6 months, and what you intend on spending in that 6 months, and then what you intend on earning in that 6 months. 6 months is great, because you guys know where you're going to be in 6 months, right? You know, generally with your projects. And like, okay, no, we'll be getting our first benchmark, we'll go into our first convention, we'll showcase it off. Oh, it's great, it's absolutely wonderful. Then, you have to do the first year. Oh, year. Ugh. It's always hard with the first year. You know, you're like, okay, well, we'll probably be releasing our first game in the first year, maybe, depending if it's small or not. I'll be wanting to pay most of my people at least $30,000 because, like, you know, they deserve it. You know, like, computer science people are probably worth like $75,000, but I'll give them $30,000 because they're my friends and they're willing to work for me. It's fine. Gonna go to E3, $10,000. $10,000 for a booth at E3. That's ridiculous. Yeah, but you have to do that. It's fine. It's absolutely wonderful. Then you have to do 2 years. 2 years is the Wild West. It's unknown territory. You're out on a wagon, lost in the desert. You have no clue where you're going to be in 2 years. And they know that. You have to show realistic projections, realistic growth. You have to show them that you're like, yeah, we're probably going to lose a little money in the first year, but we're going to just start breaking even in the second. Don't be like, no, and we're going to make our first $1 million in the second year. I've been doing this since 2005. You're not going to make your first $1 million in many, many years. I'm still waiting. But the thing is, after your second year projection, you have to do a third. 3 years! If 2 years is the Wild West, 3 years is outer space with unicorns. It is so unknown, it is a fantasy world. I don't know where I'm going to be in 3 years anywhere. I don't think I've had an apartment for 3 years straight. No one knows where they're going to be. Technically, we have our actual studio space for longer than 3 years now. Now I think about it. But you got to be realistic. But you got to basically be saying, going in our current projected rate, this is where we'll be. We will be profitable. We will be paying our people market value. We will be hiring new employees. They love seeing hiring new employees. They want to see growth. They want to see bigger projects. They want to see bigger returns. You base this money off of data. Data that you then cite because the big three, Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft, release that data. Nintendo has strangely round numbers for their figures. I don't trust them. But if you look at Microsoft's data and stuff for how much their average developers make and everything, they're like actual numbers. Not like, our average developer makes $300,000. And I'm like, I don't like the fact that it ends in zeros. Whereas with Steam, when Steam gives out their data, it's just like, our data ends in cents. Like, oh man, you don't even end in zeros. You're great. Now, the thing is that you can actually Google this, too. Sony doesn't like to give up their data easily, but it's all available on Gamasutra. There are also video game projection guides. Just Google it. My only request to you is make sure you look at the date. Because, like, Xbox Live Arcade made a lot of money when it first came out, and then, like, 2 months later, it didn't. So just saying. Now, thing is that from this data, you're then going to look at the next section, your target demographics. Now, you break up target demographics first on platform. Are you going to be mobile? Are you going to be console? Are you going to be Steam? Doesn't matter. Have a little different section saying, I'm going to release this product on this platform. And these are my target demos on each platform. And this is how many women play on this platform on average, and how many men play on this platform on average, and how many hours they play on average, and the best games in the genre on average. Again, all this data is available online. In fact, more than likely within the next few months, we'll be actually publishing it on our website on Wraith Games, just because like the data is fascinating. When we did our business plan, like we update it. That's another thing, too. You're not just going to want to make a business plan, send it off to a bank, and then you're like, oh, no, we're done. No, update it every single year, every quarter if you have the time. You won't have the time if you're successful. I'm just telling you that right now. It's like pulling teeth. But the thing is that this data is easy to find, and hopefully it'll be easier to find here very soon. Showing that you have an understanding of who your audience is, you have an understanding that on mobile devices, over 65% of players are women and girls between the ages of 13 and 36, and on average, they play about 3 hours per day and spend $9 per game is very important for the bank to know. And then you put a little citation as to where you got that data. As many varied sources as humanly possible, the better. You also want to date your citations, because then they'll be like, oh, no, we got that from pretty recently, because they want to see fresh data. If you don't have citations, they're going to be like, where did they make these numbers up from? Even if it's true numbers, games make no sense to bankers. Again, they don't think of it as a thing. It's not a real thing. So, that's your business plan. Now, you can go online and search for other facets of business plans, but these are the basics. So, now that you have a business plan, what do you do with it? Are you expecting to just walk into a bank and hand it to them and be like, please look at this business plan? Actually, yes. That's exactly what you do. I'm not even kidding. They prefer if you call ahead of time, but you don't even have to do that. Get someone charismatic. Get someone who looks nice in a dapper suit. Preferably, you can even do this. This is absolutely wonderful. Get a buddy of yours who looks really good in a dapper suit, and then like fix them up, and then you go in there, and then you're like, I'm the data person. They're just going to be the face. They don't even like, as long as you're applying for the loan, they don't care if you have a charismatic person with you. Like, it's actually really funny because our business director Thorne Penn, great credit. Me, not so much. I'm very charismatic. Neither of us look good in a suit. But he was there for the credits, and I was there for the data, and it worked out perfectly. You can absolutely team up against a banker. You go, you have your beautiful, high-gloss, hardcover business plan. You go to a bank or a credit union, I'll tell you the difference there in a minute, and say, hi, would you like to give us some of your time? We would like to apply for a small business loan, please. You go there, you give them the pitch. Bring one of your games if you have the ability to. Wow them. Perfect. Okay, cool. What do you do after that? Take the business card, follow up with them in a few days. Go to another bank, do the same thing. Now, if you have a few people, a few different banks, and they're like, hey, yeah, no, absolutely, we'd love to take you. When you make your call back, be like, oh, yeah, well, U.S. Bank actually offered me, 15% down. They're like, yeah, just saying. Then they'll fight over you, and that's the best part. You have to have a very special studio for that, though. And you have to have a very special brand, a very special understanding of what you're doing. But at the same time, sometimes you can just be like, oh, no, U.S. Bank did this. You didn't even contact U.S. Bank. Just saying. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes they'll be, oh, actually, we're firm. Like, okay, well, I actually like you better. We'll do you. Don't make it sound like it was a little white lie. Now, difference between a bank and a credit union. Banks tend to be lower risk. Banks tend to also give you more money. Banks are also way stingier with that money. Credit unions, they are run by the people. All members of credit unions are actually partial owners in that credit union, meaning it's a mom and pop shop of the banking world. They will give you way less money. They're also way more generous with that money. They also know way less about games than bankers do, which is sometimes in your benefit and sometimes very much not. Oh, prepare to be explaining a lot of stuff. But, again, if you're charismatic, you can actually get them asking a lot of questions, which is actually a very good thing as long as you have prepared answers. Try to have them memorized. They don't really look kindly on cards. Because if you have cards, that's bad. But if you're like, oh, actually turn to page 14 of our business plan. And by the way, if you can afford it, let them keep that high-quality, high-gloss, hardcover business plan. Because that'll be nice. It's not like, oh, I need that bank because you said no and I need to take it to another bank. No, just let it sit with them. Okay, so here's the thing. Banks. Banks are scary, right? Banks you have to pay back. Remember, don't go to a bank unless you are pretty sure that the data that you have presented is accurate. If the data you have presented is accurate, there's nothing to be afraid of. You know what you're capable of. You know what your team's capable of. You know exactly what the market looks like. You've done so much research. And don't skew the research to make it look better in your favor. No, give them actual research. Because if the data looks scary to you, maybe you shouldn't be applying for a loan. But that's fine. Now, angel investors. What is an angel investor? It's an alternate form of funding. An angel investor is a magical unicorn. They are a rich person who has so much money, they want to give it to you for a percentage of the controlling stake in your business. It's still very scary, but almost always worth it. Angel investors don't like video games because angel investors think that video games are manufacturing. It's really weird, and you also generally don't give an angel investor your business plan. You meet them at some sort of big gala that your small business development center has put on, and you try to woo them with stories about hockey. Yes, I had to lie about hockey to an angel investor, and it didn't even get me anywhere. And the best part about lying about hockey to the angel investor is I was taking his own tactic. I had watched one of his talks, and he'd mentioned about how he got his first angel investor by lying about golf. And then I found out he was really good about hockey. So I spent 3 days cramming about hockey. Man, I know way more about the actual Mighty Ducks than I ever thought I would. Did you know they're not just a movie? Isn't that crazy? Yeah, there are 2 teams. He did not bite. Great conversation, though. They don't understand games. Angel investors are great if you can find them, but if you have a rich uncle, that's a little better. Thank you. Now, crowdfunding. I am not going to completely scare you away from crowdfunding. I was told last time I attempted to do that that was me being mean. Crowdfunding, in my personal opinion, is a great way to build a community around a product. Anymore, it is not the best way for you to actually gain funding. It's going to take several months of pre-planning to get your Kickstarter off the ground. It's also going to take a lot of very, very crucial attention to detail in order to be able to post on and on and on while you're actually working on it. Because you have to post updates through it. You're going to have a big social media presence. And hopefully a lot of you are at my social media talk earlier. Probably not, because I only recognize a handful of you. It makes me very sad. So, thing is, though, that crowdfunding can work. I would suggest crowdfunding your second game or your third game when you have kind of a community already behind the games you've already made. Crowdfunding can work. Just be very careful that it's not some sort of magical way to get all of your money back. And you're not just, beholden to one group of investors. You're beholden to hundreds, maybe even thousands. So just be very careful. Also, another tip on that, if you're asking for too little on crowdfunding, I'll get into the question in a second. If you're asking for too little on crowdfunding, people won't take you seriously. If you're asking for too much on crowdfunding, people won't take you seriously. Know your market. Lastly, grants, and then I'm going to open up the floor for questions. Hopefully we don't run over a little too much. As far as grants are concerned, if you are an individual, not an LLC, and basically when you have to sort of choose a company type, if you're just starting a business by yourself, you're what's called a sole proprietor. Now, you can become many different types of companies, the most common of which for small businesses is an LLC, a limited liability corporation, or limited liability company, depending on your state. So the thing is that means if someone sues you, someone sues the company, they're not attacking you personally, they're not freezing your assets, they're not trying to get at you, they're suing or attacking or getting assets from the company. You could also become what's an S Corp or a C Corp. Those are usually bigger corporations. They come with a lot of benefits, but they require things like boards of directors. Very complicated. You could also become a 501c3 charity. Far more complicated. You can't have profit. You can have operational costs, but you can't have profit. Now, the thing is that if you are a 501c3 charity or an individual, the National Endowment for the Arts will fund games. Isn't that cool? However, they have to be games that enrich the culture. And there are a lot of applications. But if you think you have a really special art game, absolutely submit to the National Endowment for the Arts if you are not already an LLC. The worst they can do is say no. Sometimes your local government or state government will also be able to give grants. Same thing with universities. Sometimes universities have really great grant programs too. Just remember that grants are not available for businesses, only charities and individuals. And that's very hard to do, and that's very hard to balance sometimes. But if you're a really talented solo dev, absolutely go for it. So I'm about to open up the floor to questions. So let's start. That was, I believe, you.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, what about Fig? If you know what Fig is, it's like a crowdfunding website, but instead of just crowdfunding, you also have investors.
So I'm not personally familiar with Fig, but that sounds very similar to Kiva. So when I say Kickstarter, I'm using that as sort of the blanket term. With any platform, you're going to have to really do a lot of research, but anything where you're relying specifically on crowdfunding itself, it can become difficult. And then those also larger investors are more than likely angel investors, meaning it's going to be some hard wooing. But if it works for you, then absolutely go for it. But again, business plan is the big foundation for that. Okay, next. I live on questions? Anyone? Yes.
Could you please go into further detail on competing with the platform?
Competing with the platform. Oh, yes. That should be a talk in its own right, so I'm going to try to rush through it. Platforms are not your friend. That is very important to realize. A platform is not your friend. And generally speaking, in the games industry, people have so much disposable income that buying your game and buying someone else's game is not really an issue. The thing is that the platform itself is going to be generally curating that content. And the platform itself is going to choose the type of content that is specifically marketed to make the platform itself the most money. They are using other people's projects as weapons in order to make them as much money as possible, and also to make sure that the games that they don't think are successful sort of float to the bottom. That is what I mean by you're competing against the platform, because they're a business and they will sink your company effectively just so that they can make a quick buck without thinking about necessarily like the quality of it, which is terrifying. But at the same time, you have to work within the platform. So good press helps with that. I hope that explains.
Yeah. Anything in particular about Steam?
Steam is an almost entirely non-curated platform, and therefore you are not actually going to have the problem of them trying to intentionally sync your game so they can make them more money. However, you're also going to have the terrible, terrible problem of your game will never be promoted. So you have to do the hustle. So much hustle. Okay, you had a question.
I just wanted to ask, how many people does your studio employ again?
So we have 12 people and then 2 interns, because interns aren't real people. Yes, Trad, I'm looking at you.
That's all.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Trad's one of our interns. He watches every single talk we do, and that's going to freak him out. I just want to say it's going to be great. Okay.
What's the best way to get started and find the best path to register your company or studio?
That is always talk to a small business development center representative. Because the thing is that they're there to literally fill out all your paperwork, and they will not take a fee because they're government employees, and they will submit it to the state on behalf of you. All you have to do is pay the state, and it's absolutely wonderful, and it is painless. You could get a lawyer to do it, but they will charge a fee. SBDC actually is more knowledgeable about that sort of thing, and it's completely free. They also, since they literally work for the same people they're submitting to, know all sorts of loopholes and can even warn you ahead of time, like, hey, yeah, no, you may want to not include that on your paperwork, which is very helpful. Okay, so.
I wanted to ask if would student loans prevent you from getting a bank loan? Would they look at that and be like, no, like?
So here's the absolutely wonderful thing. If you are a business, an LLC, that is sufficiently funded already, they will be looking at what's called the business's credit. If you are an LLC that's just started out, they will look at your credit. Have a business partner with nice credit. Sometimes student loans, you can be like, no, I'm a student and it's fine. You can convince them, but if it has dinged your credit, then that's a problem. However, at that point, you can get what's called a credit builder loan, where basically what they do is they give you a small loan that you cannot touch, and then you pay back over time. And then eventually, when you pay it all back, your credit has been built. They then give you all that money. Also, there are things such as secure credit cards, where you literally pay like $700. You get a credit card that works like a normal credit card, except that if you ever go over your limit, it starts taking from that $700 that you had, and that $700 acts as your limit. The cool thing about that is they literally have not put their necks on the line so that they will give anyone a secure credit card, meaning you can then use that to build your credit. Use that for things only like rent, if your landlord will let you do that, or gas, or things that you know you can pay off immediately, and within 2-3 years your credit will be fine. Sometimes also, if a bank or a credit union sees that you're working on improving your credit, especially if those programs are already through them, more than likely they'll be more forgiving and be like, okay, well, I'm not going to give you the full amount you asked for, but I do see you're working on improving your credit. Sure, go on ahead. Also, if your school has a stipend, if your school gives you a stipend, just sort of set that aside and just spend some of that on your business, because like it's supposed to be for personal expenses anyway, and what's more personal than your livelihood? So, next questions. 1 minute. We have time for one more. And remember, I live on questions. If I go home without having questions asked to me, I will consider myself a failure.
What are the best options for the soloist or those 2 or 3 folks who are just trying to put a good game together and maybe need to go out and buy some artwork?
So that depends on the nature of the project itself. So generally speaking, if it's like really, really small, that's a GoFundMe. That is literally saying, hey, family and friends, look at my GoFundMe, give me a couple bucks. There's also Ko-fi, which I don't know how it's spelled. I think it's coffee with a K. Is it? Ko-fi. And so it's a way for people to give you like little bits. Also, and this is something I did not touch upon, if you're going to be making multiple games, Patreon is great for these tiny, tiny team. But only if you can like give like actual good updates on a schedule. Patreon is wonderful. Yep. So that is our last question. Okay. So if anyone needs to talk to me afterwards, that's cool, but this is a wrap.